Good morning. Can we get everybody to take their seats so we can get started? So we have a very special program for you today, the importance of civics engagement, a conversation with the Chief Justice of California. Let me first introduce Judge Carolyn M Caietti of the San Diego Superior Court. Judge Caietti has a distinguished CV, which is included in your materials. She has been a judge since 2006, where she began by handling 500 misdemeanor cases per week. She has also presided over juvenile delinquency cases, developing the annual Passport to Life, an education and career exposition for probationary at-risk youth. Judge Caietti was assistant presiding judge in the juvenile division from 2011 through 2013, and presiding judge of the juvenile division from 2013 to 2018, where she managed 12 delinquency and dependency departments in 5 branch court locations. As presiding judge, Judge Caietti developed the first San Diego human trafficking court for minors, known as the RISE Court. Resiliency is strength and empowerment. Judge Caietti is currently a judge in the criminal division, where she presides over criminal trials. Among many activities of note is that Judge Caietti is a member of the Democracy Steering Committee and co-chair of Power of Democracy San Diego Civics Learning Partnership. Our other distinguished speaker for this topic is Chief Justice of California, Tani Cantil-Sakauye. Chief Justice Cantil-Sakauye's biography is in your materials. She is the 28th Chief Justice of California and the first Filipina American and second woman to serve as the state's Chief Justice. Before becoming Chief Justice of California, Chief Justice Cantil-Sakauye was appointed to the Sacramento Municipal Court in 1990 and was elevated to the Superior Court of Sacramento County in 1997, where she presided over both criminal and civil cases. In 2005, she was nominated to the Court of Appeal, 3rd Appellate District, where she served for 6 years before being tapped to become Chief Justice. Chief Justice Cantil-Sakauye is a leader in revitalizing civic learning in the state through her Power of Democracy initiative. This campaign is supported by statewide partners who help revitalize democracy and promote access to justice in California. Each year, in collaboration with the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, the Chief Justice presents the Civic Learning Award to those schools that serve as models in promoting civics education. In April 2015, she was honored by the Pat Brown Institute of Public Affairs for bringing attention to the crisis in civics education in the public schools. In July 2016, the State Board of Education unanimously approved an instructional framework that encourages civics learning, accomplishing one of the initiative's goals. Judge Caietti and Chief Justice Cantil-Sakauye will lead us in a conversation about the importance of civics engagement, and there will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the program. And I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Colette. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing us to be here today. It's truly an honor and a privilege. Is the mic, I want to make sure mic check. We're on? We're on.
Not on.
Terrific. So it's my distinguished honor to be here and sharing a conversation with our Chief Justice about civic engagement and how important that is for all of us. And let me start by asking you, I know we're all deeply honored that you're here. You wear 3 hats. You want to talk about that?
Thank you, Carolyn. Golly. Sorry, good morning. Before I talk about my 3 hats, which is how I sort of view the work I do on a daily basis, I do want to thank you for inviting me and sharing this time with me. And I want to say this because I know, having worked in all 3 levels of court, trial court, appellate court, and the Supreme Court, how valuable and important your work is, and how we could not possibly do what we do without you, and how in times of crisis we call you, and together we huddle up and find the best resolution. And I've been blessed by being served by so many outstanding court executives, including Colette from the 3rd, as well as of course, the folks here. Some who are even retired, I would say, and so I'm really happy to be here and to be able to share it. I want to really shout out to Frank and Jorge for making the Supreme Court work all of these years that I've been chief. But Carolyn, I do wear 3 hats. That's how I organize the work I do. So the first hat that most folks are familiar with is the one as a jurist. I am one of 7 on the California Supreme Court. I carry the same caseload, and my vote there counts no more than anyone else's. And my role there, primarily as the chief, is to assign cases and to work very closely with our court executive clerk, Jorge Navarrete, on our budget, on every number of things with the building, on HR, on personnel, sort of like the way a presiding judge works in his or her court, or a chief judge or an appellate presiding justice in a court of appeal, except for the 7 justices. Additionally, I wear a second hat, and that is by constitution, I chair the California Judicial Council. And the Judicial Council is in our Constitution. I think you refer to it often as your AOC, but ours is a Judicial Council with a Judicial Council staff of approximately 800, with membership that the chief appoints of approximately 31 to basically a board of directors. And we are in charge of the rules and the policy of the California branch. And we look for best practices and unity, and we support legislation, and we allocate the $5.2 billion budget in California to the 58 trial courts, the 6 courts of appeal, the Supreme Court. We also sponsor a number of initiatives and work groups and task forces to face California's challenges, and we have about 32 advisory committees that are broken up into groups like probate advisory committees, civil and small claims, FAM-JUV, and these are subject matter experts, lawyers and judges, who think about proposals and changes to this area of law, and they, in that turn, send it up to the Judicial Council, and we vote as to whether or not to adopt those proposals branch-wide. And the third hat I wear is as the leader of the 3rd branch of government. So that's in that hat that I interface with the governor and with the legislature, both the Assembly and the Senate. It's where I go to talk about budget and issues and problems, and where I take on my own little projects like Civics and like keeping kids in school and like the Immigration Resource Directory.
So in other words, you don't have any time to sleep.
No, but I have great teams of people. As you all know, this could never be a one-person job. So I have great teams of dedicated people, of volunteers, who make all of these different projects and these different roles work together. We're very communicative. We have a lot of discussion and chat in the judicial branch. I think before, I don't think there was that much discussion and negotiation and sitting at a table and input. But I think now we are all really part of making this branch go forward.
What was your path to becoming a Chief Justice?
It was an unintended, unplanned path. I never expected to be Chief Justice. I was a prosecutor for a number of years in my town of Sacramento, California, and the only thing that's probably the most positive about Sacramento, California, little did I know, is it's the capital of California, and I was in the same city where the capital was. So I was a prosecutor for a number of years. And then I heard the governor, George Deukmejian, who recently passed away, was looking for a DA type. So I knew nothing about government and nothing about anything in the Capitol, but hundreds of us went and interviewed for that position. And luckily, now Administrative Presiding Justice Vance Ray of the 3rd District Court of Appeal was looking for a second lawyer for his team. They needed 2 lawyers for the governor in those days, and he picked me. And I knew nothing, and he trained me. And it was at that point that I realized that governors appoint judges. And because I was so new, I was 6 years into my profession, and I learned that you need to be 6 years to be, as a lawyer, to be a judge for municipal court. And I had 6.5 years. So George Deukmejian, when he was leaving and not seeking re-election as governor, started to place his senior staff. And so I went to the municipal court via George Deukmejian, and am forever grateful for putting me on that path. Then I went up through the court system, and Governor Schwarzenegger was looking for a chief when Chief Justice Ron George, my predecessor, retired. And all of us in the branch were guessing and speculating, who would that person be? And the newspapers were printing out all the names of the candidates, and I was on none of those lists. And I didn't expect to be on any of those lists. I'd been a CA justice at the 3rd for 6 years. I was minding my own business. And then I get a call out of the blue to interview with Schwarzenegger for the Chief Justice position. And I think he's putting together a list. He wants to say he interviewed a diverse group of candidates. I fit several of those bills, so I'm going to go for that interview, and I have nothing to lose. And I was the first on the list, first to be interviewed, and after the interview, he offered me the job, much to my surprise. I later learned that Chief George had put together a short list of people he thought could be considered for chief, and that Governor Schwarzenegger was of the mind that don't waste my time, just tell me who would you pick from the short list. And I tell you, I was very surprised to be picked because I had served on Judicial Council with Chief George, but I never held a holy position to ever sit next to him. I was never in his circle, and that was fine. I was doing my work, so was everyone else. I didn't expect that. So I was surprised, and I learned that they had read all of my CA opinions, and they had pretty much looked through my history before I was on the list. And I learned that after the fact, and had I known during the fact, I would have been very nervous. So I'm glad I didn't know about any of that till much later.
Wow, well, we're so fortunate to have you as the head of our branch
Thank
of
you,
government.
Carolyn.
It's amazing. You do such amazing work. She's so inspiring, as you can gather, just from the few brief moments she's already spoken. So I've been a part of the Civics Learning Partnership and on the statewide Power of Democracy. And you've talked about your initiative here with civics engagement as well as keeping kids in school and out of the prison pipeline. And one of the questions I get is, why civics? Why is our Chief Justice focused on civics?
Thank you, Carolyn. I will tell you that I came into this work not thinking at all that civics would be a focus, but civics became a focus because 8 years ago when I became chief, the state, as you remember, was in an economic downfall with no bottom in sight. And the judicial branch was being cut millions and billions of dollars, and courts, trial courts and courts of appeal, trial courts were laying people off and closing courtrooms and closing courthouses and closing courts for a day and a month. And we were furloughing people and laying people off. And we didn't know when this would end. And these weren't cuts that we could plan for. They were happening mid-budget. You're losing $600 million, cut. And we were in the midst of also having our caseload. Our caseload grew. This is a time of recession, more filings in probate, guardianships, conservatorships, civil. We were inundated. We were underwater. And so I went to the Capitol, which was unusual for the chief to go directly to speak to the legislature. The chief previously would speak to the governor, and that would take care of it. But we were in such a free fall. California was in a $28 billion deficit. And the judicial branch on the slice of the pie, on the budget pie, we're only 2%, but we are also discretionary 2%. So that means you can take from us, and there's no federal backlash. There's no backlash at all. And so they were taking from us. And the branch up to that point had had all these pots of money that we had saved. We'd saved them for projects, like a computer system, like to build courthouses. And the legislature saw these pots of money, and they raided them. First, they said, we'll take a loan, and then it was just an all-out sweep. So I went to the legislature, and I went to different members, and I went to leaders, and I tried to talk about the branch. And the information and the feedback I was, well, who are you? What's the judicial branch? What agency are you under? How many chiefs are there, and am I talking to the right chief? Then when I would explain how we worked, and mind you, I had like 8 seconds to explain this to someone who has a troop of other lobbyists out in the hallway, they would say, well, we don't like how your system works because the trial judges should work for you, the appellate justice should work for you, and you should work for us. And I thought, where am I? This is the capital of Sacramento, California. How do I begin to respectfully bring these folks along to understand us? And so you just can't go to the leader of the assembly and say, you know, have you ever heard of civics? There's 3 branches of government. We're independent. You passed the law. We interpret it. And, you know, I was the DA mentality. I wanted to, you know, reach across the table and strangle someone. Not myself, but so it really came back, and I dug through papers and found Chief George's report on the importance of civics and how the judicial branch should take a lead because we are so poorly misunderstood and not known. And so I brushed off that dusty page and put leaders like yourself in charge of let's focus on K through 12, and let's make the state leaders and the legislators, let's make them our partners in this so we educate them as well as bring them along, as well as be sitting at the table with them. They learn, we learn, but we're reaching out to the future leaders, and we're engaging judges, and we're engaging lawyers. And that's how civics in California started. And it started when it started, I found that there was a great interest and a great need and great engagement with people who are not our traditional partners in the judicial branch. They weren't just lawyers. Union leaders wanted access to civics because they wanted their members to understand structure and governance. And business wanted civics because they wanted their employees to understand the importance of it. It was interesting how many groups came out, as diverse as they were, that wanted to be part of judicial branch civics education.
I can't echo that enough. Locally, we've had the Chamber of Commerce, we've had educators, deans of the law school, we've had the League of Women Voters, nonprofit members, lawyers, judges, both on the state and federal side, and some folks that are here in the audience have also been participants at the local level. And it's not too often you get to see such a broad, diverse group of folks with a common theme, regardless of what their background is or political affiliation, because it's non-political. It's so critical.
Absolutely. I would say, too, that it's been a place where judges are able, and staff are able to reach out into the community and talk in a safe space about the work we do. It's not about the cases. It's about the structure and the importance. It's about the separation of powers. It's about the history of California. And so we do have an amazing diverse group of people, including educators. We don't even speak the same language as educators. And the education code in California is Byzantine, in my view. But when we sit down at a table and we find a common, I want to say, language and dialogue, we've been able to really create partnerships. Like San Diego has one of the best civics partnerships in the state that we've created, as you've described. And I know that you also have started the Judges in Classrooms pilot program, bringing judges in communities into classrooms with reading, with speech material and information. And frankly, it has benefits for everyone: the students, the teachers, the judicial branch, the bar associations, and for judges who stand election. It makes a big difference to be known in your community outside of your traditional stakeholders.
How has your perspective on civics been influenced by your personal life, and in particular being a mom of 2 daughters?
Thank you, Carolyn. Yes, well, I think of civics education as being beyond governance, beyond structure, beyond municipalities, counties, state, national, beyond the 3 branches of government. I think of civics also as meaning engagement, and that means teaching folks to work in groups and being collaborative and being transparent and being inclusive and being respectful, because chances are you're going to have conflict in your discussions and you can't move beyond conflict without being respectful and civil, just as we do in the judicial branch. And so I see an aspect of civics education, particularly engagement, as civic leadership or individual leadership. You learn to think analytically, you learn to work together, you learn to understand differences, you learn from those differences. And so I will tell you that just my own background coming in education and my family's experiences and being the mother of 2 girls, and what's happening in California, what's happening nationally, is something that we talk about regularly. And there's a renewal in young people about what's happening in governance and the laws and the federal branch and the state branch. So civics has really helped create this dialogue and this greater conversation with my daughters, and when they talk about the Me Too movement or they talk about national policies. And they're in college and they run across folks who have different points of view. And we talk about the ground rules of civics engagement. And it is to be civil, it is to be polite, it is to be understanding, it is to learn from one another and to be better from that education. It's about getting to resolution, and that means getting to a place where you might often have to negotiate to get to resolution. So I think it's been a terrific opportunity. They're tired of hearing me speak about the separation of powers. They're tired of driving in the car and they say, oh, we're in San Joaquin County. And I say, there are 58 counties in California and each has its own. And I go into my whole spiel and they just, but if we talk about how it is that this county in Southern California, the mayor just outlawed neckties, what does that mean? And so we have this discussion, and I can slip in my education with civics engagement about what's happening in the world in that way.
When you started this initiative, what have you seen as a result of that, both statewide and at local levels, in terms of bringing about more civic awareness?
Carolyn, I have seen an incredible receptive audience of volunteers, of people who have tremendous ideas about how to implement civics education and engagement on the ground in their community, in their high schools, in their elementary schools. And we are blessed with the creativity of the people who bring this kind of information to the schools. And let me say that civics education is not about really government. It's about getting these students involved in a group to work on a project and to organize. And sometimes the project does require city or a local permit, and these students going to their local government to get the permit. So really, I've seen that the difference is we've seen huge reception of interest and creativity, and then we've seen the students who've received this kind of encouragement blossom and become innovative and become engaged. I've seen students, particularly high school students, who come up to me who are English might be a second language, and they say, you know, I never thought about college, but now I'm thinking about community college. Or, wow, I went to City Hall and I visited and I shook the mayor's hand and I took a picture with her. And so they're talking about instances that are happening to them in school that's engaging them about their government and the world around them. And then they take it home to their parents. And then when we give out the civics awards, the parents come, and the different legislators come, and the sheriff comes, and the DA comes, and the public defender comes, and they all get introduced. And the community looks at them and sees them. It brings communities together. So I have been very pleased and impressed and inspired by the leadership of our civics engagement project. And our leader is Administrative Presiding Justice Judy McConnell, who is a Court of Appeal justice in San Diego in the 4th District Court of Appeal. And she's reached out to you and so many others. We have to turn folks away because we can't have that much on our leadership steering committee because we have no money for this, by the way. This is all volunteer and grant money and donations that get us to where we are. But we have students now who are in law school who remember their civics education from the judicial branch. And we're better understood. We're defended by young people.
Well, you're being too humble here, but I think our state governor passed an initiative, AB 24. There's a state seal of civic engagement. They're working out the parameters. So a youth who graduates from high school now, this was just passed, I believe, in the last year.
Yes.
They can get a special acknowledgement of their civic engagement, which I think is just amazing and really a wonderful thing. And also, what's huge in the state of California is they've changed the educational standards for history, social, and science framework to really put an emphasis on civics. And I would like to think, I know this is my own personal view, that your efforts and the efforts of all of us have really been driving that in part to make that happen. So I think it's just a really exciting time.
I do too. It's surprising how it's become so relevant. We all knew when we started this project that civics in high schools are taught in the 12th grade, your senior year, in the 2nd semester. So when you think about that, it's basically not taught at all. And so we knew that these were the folks going into college, and we knew these are the folks who go into law school, some of them, and go on. And so we knew we needed to fill a need, and people really came forth and very creative. The civic seal is someone's idea. It's an exciting one. And when you think about civic engagement and people who become aware of their communities and what they can do in them, those are the same people who go into work in the judicial branch and support the branch in many, many ways. And it continues to grow. We've actually reached out to do an adult civics engagement project because of California's population. We're a majority minority, and many folks in California haven't come from a functioning democracy. So if they're learning anything about civics, they're learning it from their kids. And so we decided to form a group. It's called the Institute for Democracy and Justice. It reflects the same kind of diverse leadership that exists now in all of the different organizations and the Power of Democracy. And we help fund Power of Democracy with some of our fundraising efforts. And we are reaching out to diverse communities and providing free lessons on the 3 branches of government. And it's so important that we do that and that it's been adopted into the civics education curriculum here in California, because typically when it's taught, the judicial branch, if it's mentioned at all, is always the federal branch. And it's always those horrible cases that talk about Jim Crow and what were those justices thinking. So we are happy that there'll be a more even-handed description of the judicial branch in the future, and that this is what students will grow up with and will be tested upon, so that the next Chief Justice or any of you who go into the Capitol to lobby for a stable and fair budget don't first have to explain who you are when you ask for what is rightfully due to run a third branch of government.
One thing that really motivated me when Justice McConnell knocked on my door and said, would you be willing to participate here in San Diego? It was a resounding yes, because at the time I was in charge of juvenile. And one of the things that I deal with, just like all of you, is the Constitution, day in and day out. And one of the things I would ask the youth, no matter what age, and the DA would always get a grin on his face in my courtroom because he knew what the answer would be. Public defender would sit next to their client, and I would, when you take a plea, you have to go through constitutional rights, you know, the right to remain silent, et cetera. And I'd always ask the youth, have you ever heard of the US Constitution or the Bill of Rights? Age 12, 15, 16, 17, 90% of the time the answer was no. And it was really troubling to me to see that. And then on a personal level, my family, I'm a first-generation American. My mom came over from Europe at the age of 15, undocumented, unaccompanied minor, I should say. Unaccompanied minor right before World War II. And one of the things was education and just coming to a country that really offers opportunity. And my dad served in World War II and the Korean War and all that. And then my grandmother came over from Slovakia. And I remember quizzing her about becoming a citizen and the test she had to take, and how hopefully everyone else would appreciate that already is in this country and a U.S. citizen, how important and how valuable our country is, and making sure we all understand what democracy means. And so from a very personal level for me, just being able to try to work to bring more awareness to our youth and our community is just huge for me and very meaningful. So
That's great.
Thank you.
I didn't know that.
So what's your vision going forward? How to sustain this?
Well, our vision going forward is to always remember what our goal is and what our values are. So our goal is to, of course, emphasize the three branches of government with an emphasis on the judiciary, because no other entity, no other organization ever focuses on the work of the judiciary and the work as a whole. There may be some judicial fellowships that teach all about staff and lawyers and what judges do, but this is going to be more along the lines, we hope, of people simply growing up understanding the three branches of government and the value and importance of an impartial and independent judiciary. So we hope to continue to be a strong presence in K through 12 and to reach even yet more school districts and more partnerships, because the only way this really works is if it's happening locally. And so San Diego has a tremendous local program, as do a few other counties, but we still need to involve more counties of our 58. We still need as diverse organizations or people to come forward to talk about the branch and the work in the branch, what you do, what lawyers do, what judges do, and why it's important. And maybe we have to start with why it's important, and then the understanding of peeling away all of the people in the work in the public sector who devote their lives to why it's important. And of course, we continue to use current events because that's most relevant to students. So we hope to continue this. We hope to make it stronger. Our goal has always been to provide it to every student of every economic means in every district, and we have a ways to go on that. We continue to provide these competitive award programs. We need to get more schools involved, but now we have anywhere from kindergarten through seniors competing for the highest civics awards. And I will tell you, I saw kindergartners take the song from Bruno Mars, and I can't remember that song, but it's very popular. Uptown Funk, thank you. And they turned it into, every word was about democracy and justice and fairness. They turned it into Hamilton, and they rapped it and sang it at a function, of course, won one of the best awards. But we know that those kids who learn those words over and over to be able to do that are going to go into first and second grade and bring that kind of learning and understanding. You know, it's interesting, kids now tell me that in addition to always wanting to be sports athletes and rock stars and artists, they want to be now judges and they want to be lawyers and they want to work in the courts. One school has devoted an entire classroom to a mock courtroom where they every day put on the robes and this is how they resolve student conflict through teen court, and they use the courtroom. So we hope that it continues to grow. We hope that we reach folks. We also hope really that we get more judges, more of you involved to bring your creativity and your local touch and your local connections to the communities that need this, because it's life-sustaining, but it's also just the right thing to do for folks and for the future of I think our government. And we also continue to hope that the legislature and the judicial and the executive branch will be more aware and conscious of the judicial branch, and this will hopefully lead to better relationships and a softer hand when it comes to budget cuts, and an understanding really of the Federalist Papers. The law is a dead letter if the courts aren't there to otherwise interpret it. So it is an ongoing effort, and it's one that we can rally about. It's affirmative, and it brings in our diverse partners.
I know one of the things Justice McConnell and I, we would go around to invite community leaders to join our local partnership. And I was really surprised, I won't say who, but it was one of the entities of law enforcement didn't understand the need to be involved. And I thought, wow, you know, we have a lot of work to do. But we did get them involved. And it's been very, very successful. In San Diego, just to give you an idea, we have probably 12 out of our 40-plus school districts adopted a civic learning resolution. And there's actually some of our largest school districts have people in charge of developing curriculum from grades K through 12. San Diego Unified is one, San Diego County Office of Education. And those are probably the bulk of our student population countywide. Covers countywide, and it's been very, very helpful. We've also had civic showcases where we've had folks, and again, we don't have a budget either at a local level, but we've had some grants and generosity of the American Board of Trial Advocates is one group, ABOTA, where they've sponsored, and teachers come and get ideas from the students and from other educators, because I'm not an educator. I wouldn't know first thing how to tell people how to teach children. I'll leave that to the educators, but they get great ideas. And it's really, I've really seen some wonderful things happen.
I want to say too that we have, through the power of democracy, your work, we have on the website for our education department a number of electronic formats that teach civics with an emphasis on the judiciary that are ready-made, that the teachers who are overworked already have little time can download, and it's ready-made product. It's a turnkey operation. And with your judges in the classroom, it connects teachers to judges to bar associations. It gives bar associations to another opportunity they want to engage with judges, and they also want to engage in the community. And it brings us together to talk about something that we all sort of have taken for granted that we thought everyone else knew.
So one of the things, if you're interested in, this is a report. It's on the www.powerofdemocracy.org if you'd like to see this is what the Power of Democracy Steering Committee put together that really, I know you can talk more about this, but talks about the need for civics learning. And on that website, there's also what we call a digital chalkboard that was just alluded to that gives ideas for teachers that can be anything from a 1-hour lesson or a half-hour lesson up to the course of a semester as an example. But they're great learning tools for our educators. And so if I was in the audience right now, I'd be thinking, well, what can I do to further these efforts? What's my involvement in this?
That's a great question, and thank you for that one. Let me say first, I think courts play an important part, and we know, for example, many courts do outreach. Courts of appeal do outreach. It's a lot of work. It's a traveling roadshow. One of my colleagues calls it Henry VIII and his 16 wives, and we take the show on the road. And so part of that outreach is to try to encourage either students taking your oral arguments to students in high schools, which I know the courts of appeal here do. It also means bringing and inviting them into your courtroom and designating a person in your court to sort of wrangle all the students and the teachers with preparation, like electronically providing a short summation of the case to be argued. It helps to invite and bring along your bar associations to those educational programs because they can explain in better and simpler terms what's happening in court to the students. I mean, there's a lot of ways to make that interesting and interactive by either going on the road or bringing the road in. Also, I think that what we are doing in California is we are doing far more live streaming of oral argument. And believe it or not, nothing's changed about, in my view, of the presentation of advocacy at oral argument with live streaming. And so that's a way to bring people in and to use as a tool that you can begin to suggest to your courts. In addition to being court-centered and court-based with those kinds of programs, so many of you can bring back the idea and work with a group and get volunteer staff and justices to reach out to one school as a pilot and to begin this, and reach out to the local bar association where your court is housed to partner with you and to provide the funding and maybe to provide and help with the literature. There are so many ways, and it's surprising how many folks are interested and want to be part of it and take it on and take it to levels you couldn't have imagined on your own. I think that's how it starts. That's how we started, small, and we were surprised. I mean, this task force brochure that we put out was at the end, we did a summit to call attention to it. And we did a Hail Mary, and we asked Sandra Day O'Connor, will you please come, because we knew that she was so involved with iCivics. And she came. And she spoke about the importance of civics in eloquent terms that I cannot replicate. And from that, we formed a committee. We had plaintiffs' lawyers, defense lawyers, we had unions, we had the California Chamber. These are people who would not talk to each other on any normal basis and who don't particularly care for each other across an aisle or a table. And yet they came together to help bring this program together and to bring this brochure and to start our programs. And the young lady who's on the front cover is now in law school. And I think she came out of San Diego.
Brawley.
Brawley, which Brawley is, you fly to San Diego, you drive 3 hours east. You're still in San Diego, but you are in a community where high population, almost 100% population of Mexican-American, farming, poor community, and they continue to win the highest Civics Engagement Award in California over and over again. And the Court of Appeal has been out there to do a program, and that's reaching folks who would otherwise not ever have any reason to think that we existed or that they could be a part of it.
Right, the principal over there and some of the teachers in the Brawley Unified School District, they are just champions of of civics. Maybe physics too. Well, so if some of these folks, I know not everyone here is from California, but if they went back to their courts and their justices were interested, what do you suggest they do if they're interested in pursuing something similar to what we do here?
If you're interested in pursuing this, I think the first person that you should contact who knows who in your community might already have something set up is going to be Debbie Genzer. Because Debbie Genzer is our one person who is dedicated to civics in our 800-member Judicial Council staff. And the reason she's most instrumental is because she knows all of the programs. And then once you know who your contact people are in your community, or maybe you become that contact person in your community, then, of course, we have resources. And then, of course, it's, Justice McConnell and Judge Carolyn M Caietti and so many others who would then be part of helping to start that with ideas, including reaching out to the president of your bar association or even the state bar or other organizations like ABOTA that we know has as their mission and main mission civics and preservation of the civil jury trial, who are really a great part actually of adult civics, in fact, that we are planning for next year.
And some of the things we've done in California is we've reached out. The state of Washington and Florida have some great civics programs for teachers. And so we've found, and I think Debbie Genzer would say this, there's really a strong desire, whether people are not taking their curriculum and just not sharing it. They want to share it and they want to make it available, because I think we all realize this isn't just a local or state, it's a nationwide issue that's just critical. So we're going to open it up to questions in just a moment. Did you want to say anything else before we hear from folks?
You know, I want to say one thing, and I mentioned it earlier. I never became chief understanding that civics would be a goal, but it was the sign of the times. If we weren't in recession and if we didn't have to go to the legislature to beg for money, I'm not sure that that would have been something that I would have considered. But it took on such a life of its own. Legislators have invited me to breakfast clubs, to their communities, to talk only about civics and the 3 branches. And it's built these relationships that I otherwise never really thought would have existed in terms of our governance. And so it has benefits far beyond teaching K through 12 and in ennobling and encouraging and incentivizing young people to be a part of their community.
You know, one thing with the Civics Learning Award, I've gone to the local awards here in San Diego. We've been fortunate to have some of those champion schools, and one of them is my middle school that I went to, and ultimately the high school. And I remember one of the kids, I asked them, they did community service. This one youth developed a way for youth to figure out how to tie their shoelaces, as you know, just as an example. Another one was clean water and giving back in the community. And I asked them, well, now that you're going on to high school, what's your plan? Are you going to continue to do this? And they were absolutely sold on it and said, absolutely, we're going to be a part of our community. We want to help. And when we're older and out and working, we want to make sure that we give back to our community. So I was really pleased at that the initiative that many of these kids actually have. It's wonderful.
I want to say I was impressed by 2 things I saw recently. A high school that won the award, their project was they did a voters registration drive at the college across the street. And in order to get the freshmen and the others to attend the voter registration drive, they had a root beer social for free. So already they know how to get people to show up to things.
There you go.
And I think I was at the last Civics Award engagement with you, and remember we saw these young kids wearing T-shirts that said, "Got Civics" on it.
I should have worn that today. I actually have that T-shirt.
Yeah.
It's great. So folks, do any of you have any questions? Now's your chance. Don't be bashful. There we go.
Madam Chief Justice, you referenced having to go to the legislature and lobby, and I know California is unique with Louisiana in that the court of last resort sits in a municipality that's not the state capital. Do you think that is an advantage, disadvantage, mixed bag with your relationship with the other branches of government, and why?
Thank you. It's a mixed bag. Well, originally the California Supreme Court did start out in San Francisco and Sacramento and did start out in the same building, but grew out of the building. And then we were first built to be in Sacramento, and then the Chief Justice nixed that idea after the building was finished. Just incidentally, that Chief Justice's name was Chief Justice Waste. I mean, interesting. That's how I remember it. But maybe that was a wise move, because there have been times when the legislature, especially during our recession, they were livid at the branch, and for reasons that I think were largely misunderstood. So it was good that we weren't there where they could find us and summon us. And so when I do head there from San Francisco or for other meetings, it's a little bit more of an occasion because I'm there rather than always being there. I know other states, I know Iowa, I was talking to the chief there who said he, in light of problems there and tensions, he has established a sort of a satellite office in the legislature where people can come see him. I think that really just depends on the circumstances of your state, but ours are volatile. I prefer to be in and out. I prefer to light touch in the legislature and basically not to be there unless I have to be. I prefer surrogates because surrogates can bring back the temperature, basically.
Question in the back.
Similar type question, but you mentioned about educating children, educating adults. How do you go about educating the legislature? In Louisiana, we had, when I started 30-something years ago, the majority of the legislature were attorneys. And when the court went to, not lobby, but to inform them of certain things and how the government worked, and how the judiciary worked, there was an understanding to start out with. And today, I'd say we probably have like 5% attorneys, and it's a difficult task just to get them to understand what the judiciary is and how we work. So what's your goal, and how do you propose educating the legislators?
Thank you. California has exactly what you described in the situation with the legislature in Louisiana. Fewer attorneys in either house. And then the attorneys who were there have not really practiced, or they practiced very fleetingly and long ago, and we're no longer that branch, really. And so it's a very delicate job to try to educate the legislature. And to be honest, it's not just the legislature, but they're foremost because they make decisions primarily having to do with laws and our budget and discretion of the courts. So I am telling you, that has been an issue that has confounded us, how to get to that place. And so I'll just give you a few failed examples and then where we are now. So the first failed example was to try to get a group of representative judicial officers and staff to be in the legislative orientation program for all new legislators that come into office. Because I know that like staff, like judges, like lawyers, they have educational programs. But I learned very quickly that it is a closed society. They do not want any interlopers there. I don't know what they talk about, but we weren't allowed. And we tried different avenues of approach, not only going to the leaders of the legislature, but also going to the institution that provides the education to be part of it. No one wanted any part of it, so that was not going to work. So then we thought that we could have, as the chief, deliver in the state of the judiciary sort of a little civics lesson every year. Well, I'm not sure that works either, because I don't know how long, if they're paying attention, even though they're sort of staring in your direction. And so that didn't work. Then we decided we need to do it, we need to break it down one-on-one. So we have successfully, I think, done Judges' Day on the Bench, where judges invite legislators to be on the bench with them or to spend a day in the court. And that usually involves the end of the week when the legislator is not at the Capitol, but back in their district office, where presumably they have more time and more attention to spend on a subject. So we do that regularly. We also do a bench bar coalition, where the group of lawyers and judges group together, get briefed on the issues, have talking points, and they swarm and cover the Capitol for every legislator. We do that. But I think we continue to now try to bring them along. And civics education is a premier program because we sometimes partner with legislators, and they participate and they invite their constituents. But at the same time, we're not preaching to them. We're preaching at civics education. We're explaining to school children, and they can't help but get the concept and the idea, especially when the students perform their programs as well. And they get feedback and compliments for being part of civics education. So that's one way of bringing them along, by joining with them. But I'm going to tell you that our biggest effort yet is going to be next year in 2019 with ABOTA and our State Federal Judicial Council and our Judicial Council and some other organizations that are bipartisan. We're going to have the first ever beta, we call it the Legislative Judicial Summit. In 2019, I've canvassed the leadership. We've picked a date. We've picked a location at a law school. And we are inviting all members of the legislature and some members of the judiciary to engage in a one-day summit to describe and explain through interactive panels and speakers how we each approach our jobs of governance in California. So one of the panels may be the legislative process, and the other panel is the judicial process. Interactive with folks to explain what we do. It's a summit about education and about doing our jobs better. And we hope to bring in, we're hoping to bring in what's been called sizzle in order to get the legislature to attend this. So we're looking at names like Justice Sotomayor. We're looking at names like Governor Schwarzenegger. We're looking at names like Kamala Harris. We're looking and praying for a name like Nina Totenberg. This is an idea that's never been done because everyone says legislators won't attend. We're not going to be in Cuba, so it's not going to be all that fun. We can't provide a lot of swag. There won't be great gifts walkaways. We're not giving away Rolexes. We're going to be doing a civics education under the guise of cheap wine and heavy hors d'oeuvres. And we hope to have a day of it, half a day. And we're bringing it together. We have the commitment of the leadership. We sent out a save the date card. We have my name and the legislative leadership. And we're working on the next governor of California. We're going to approach both of the gubernatorial candidates and ask them to hold the date. So we're crossing our fingers, and we're going to take the leap to try to do the first ever legislative judicial summit. And that's going to be, we hope, an ongoing effort. We have a lot of naysayers and doubters out there, but my view is, how could it be worse? And so if we can't get legislators, maybe our next effort will be to get legislative staffers, who are so important and critical to the process. And if we can't get them, we might look toward municipal leadership, who will eventually go into the legislature, into Congress, kind of like K through 12, and get them before they go on to places where they're making statewide decisions. But we're being pretty affirmative, and we're partnering. We're asking ABOTA to give us the funding. And ABOTA is very interested because they want an educated legislature as well. And we're going to try this. You know, in California, we have the Law School for Journalists, which is a week-long program that has enormous success. So we're going to model our summit some way after that, and we'll be able to tell you how that works in about a year.
That's great. And ABOTA, by the way, is a nationwide organization with state chapters and local chapters, for those of you that are not in California. Any other questions? All right, well, there we go.
Hi, I'm from Illinois, and I just wanted to add something similar to what you were talking about. We've had similar issues trying to have better coordination between the judicial branch and the legislative branch. And one of the things that our court started doing a couple years ago is holding one evening oral argument when they knew that the court was in term, or when the legislature was in term, and invite the legislators. And they tried to identify a case that was a statutory interpretation of perhaps a criminal statute. And there was a lot of success. The timing, they tried to time it so that they knew the legislators were getting out of committee and before the evening events started. And you know, they had pretty good attendance, and it was a nice dialogue, I think.
That's a great idea. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Now's your chance. Okay. Well, thank you all for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great job.
That was wonderful. That was fun.